If you are like me, then you're super excited about the upcoming Legend of Zelda game, Echoes of Wisdom. This game was introduced to us as the first game of the main franchise, with Zelda as the protagonist instead of Link. However, the ESRB rating just came out and it included some details that Nintendo may or may not have wanted to get out there since it wasn't revealed in a trailer, so let's dig through the description that we got from the ESRB, and if you're a fan of the Zelda series, then go ahead and subscribe to the channel for more Zelda and Nintendo content in the future. Alright, so here's the quote that we got from the ESRB. This is an adventure game in which players assume the role of Zelda as she attempts to dispel rifts throughout Hyrule and rescue Link. From a 3/4 overhead perspective, players explore various environments while fighting stylized enemies, i.e. humans and creatures. As Link, players use a sword and arrows to defeat enemies. Zelda can use a magic wand to summon creatures, i.e. wind-up knights, pig soldiers, and slime, for battle. Some enemies can be defeated by being set on fire, other creatures dissolve into mist when defeated. Battle sequences are somewhat frenetic, with several enemies attacking or fighting at once. Alright, so there was actually a lot more than probably meets the eye in that quote, and I've got 3 main takeaways from it, so let's break them down. First of all, we'll be dispelling rifts from Hyrule. So these rifts aren't here to stay. It looks like with the help of Tri, we'll be able to safely enter these rifts in order to dispel them. We saw Zelda inside these rifts in the trailer, but as it turns out, we'll be removing them after completing the task. It somewhat reminds me of the shrines from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. This also clarifies another scene in the trailer where we see a house covered in a rift. This will likely serve as a progression lock. A good example of this is the shrinking ability in Minish Cap, where you could shrink down to progress through a house in Castletown, whereas otherwise before you learn how to shrink you wouldn't have been able to navigate the house and progress. This has been something that's been prevalent in Zelda titles, and now it's back. This house likely either has a special reward or an item or plot progression point that's required to move the story along. These are almost assuredly self-contained worlds, which likely rule out the idea of a dark world. The second big revelation is the one everyone is talking about, describing Link as playable. As it turns out, Link will be playable in Echoes of Wisdom, so Zelda doesn't completely get her own game. Link will engage in combat with his sword, bow, and shield like normal. What I think is most likely is we'll spend the majority of the game rescuing Link. Then, once we have him, they'll travel together and we will be able to swap characters as the situation calls for. Need to shoot an eyeball to open gates? Swap Link in. Need to create a bridge? Swap Zelda in. Then the final encounter with Ganon will require you to swap back and forth with both Link and Zelda, defeating Ganon together. But also, maybe it's as simple as we start the game as Link, battle Ganon, and then it's all Zelda from then on out. I find this a bit unlikely because Zelda games are very intentful about tutorials and teaching the player how to play the game. The idea that we'd learn how to control Link and then immediately have that thrown out the window, only to be used at the very end of the game, just seems out of place for me. I could see maybe he comes in halfway or a little later in the game, and then we learn how to play as Link. But either way, it's not exactly the spotlight Peach got in her game Princess Peach's Showtime. But having Zelda as playable is still very cool. Finally, the last piece about battle sequences being frenetic is interesting, because that is not typical Zelda. And, I mean, of course we all know what frenetic means, so I'll just keep explaining. Fast and energetic in a rather wild and uncontrolled... Oh, okay. This remark is interesting because there is nothing frenetic about the combat we see in the trailer. What this makes me think of more is the combat like we see in Hyrule Warriors, as opposed to something like Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, or even A Link Between Worlds, the last 3/4 top-down view game that we got. But if the Tri pieces are indeed collectibles, then it would be cool to see Zelda controlling like an army of moblins, or what did they call them earlier, pig soldiers? And then Link is out here slaying away. An active combat experience would be really exciting, and I think this opens up the door for a lot of possibilities. Well, if you enjoyed this breakdown, let me know by giving this video a like, and I'll be back with more Echoes of Wisdom discussion so that we can continue the conversation, Chat Nation.